Welcome in, everyone, to another deep dive.
Mm,
Today, we're going to be looking at this physiology handout about the autonomic nervous system from Dr. Rasha Eldeeb.
okay.
And I think this is a good one to do a deep dive into because this is like the system that most people don't really think about much, you know? It's all the stuff happening behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah.
It's keeping your heart beating and your lungs breathing and all that stuff.
Exactly.
So before we jump into all the details of like the handout, what do you think are some of the like key things that people should know about the autonomic nervous system?
Well, I think the first thing is to just sort of like maybe step back a little bit, right?
Uh,
And remember that the nervous system as a whole is like this command center for your body.
yeah.
And the autonomic nervous system is like a branch of that handles all the stuff that you don't have to think about.
Yeah, like all the automatic stuff.
Exactly, like your heart beating, your breathing, digestion, all that good stuff that's happening behind the scenes 24/7.
Yeah, so it's like always working,
Well,
even when we're not even aware of it.
absolutely. And it's doing a lot more than you might think.
So how does it know what to do? Like, does it have a little instruction manual somewhere?
Well, not exactly an instruction manual, but it does have these amazing communication pathways.
Okay.
You can kind of imagine it as like a network of nerves that extend from your brain and spinal cord to like every single organ and tissue in your body.
Wow. So it's like this huge network.
It's massive,
Hmm.
and it's constantly sending and receiving signals to keep everything running smoothly.
So it's like a super highway of information constantly flowing.
Exactly. And within this network, we've got two main players,
Okay.
the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of those before.
They're kind of like two sides of the same coin, always working together to maintain balance.
Right. And I think people usually associate those with like fight or flight and rest and digest.
You
Right.
got it. The sympathetic nervous system, that's your fight or flight specialist.
Okay.
So like picture this, you're about to give a presentation and you're feeling
Right.
nervous.
Yeah. Been there.
Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, maybe you even feel a little shaky.
Yeah, for sure.
That's your sympathetic nervous system kicking into gear, preparing you to either face the challenge head on or run away.
Right. So it's like our body's way of getting us ready for action.
Exactly. And it's essential for survival in dangerous situations.
Makes sense. But we can't be in fight or flight mode all the time, can we?
Definitely not. That's where the parasympathetic nervous system comes in.
Okay. The rest and digest side.
Exactly. It's all about calming things down, slowing your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure, stimulating digestion, basically helping your body recover and recharge.
Okay. So it's like the opposite of the sympathetic system.
Exactly. It's like hitting the brakes after a long drive.
That's a good analogy. So these two systems, they're constantly working together, right?
Absolutely. They're always engaged in this sort of delicate dance, adjusting their activity levels to keep your body in a state of what we call dynamic equilibrium.
And that's like homeostasis, right? Keeping everything in balance.
Exactly. It's like your body's internal thermostat, always working to maintain the optimal temperature for everything to function properly.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems working together. But I remember learning about ganglia too. What are those again?
Ah, ganglia. Those are like the unsung heroes of the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
They're like little relay stations, clusters of nerve cells that sit outside the brain and spinal cord.
Okay.
And they help to regulate the activity of different organs and tissues.
So they're like these little mini control centers throughout the body.
Exactly. And there are different types of ganglia, each with its own specific role.
Oh, interesting. So
Yep.
what are the different types?
Well, one type is the lateral ganglia, and these guys form a chain along your spine. They're really important for coordinating the widespread effects of the sympathetic nervous system.
So like when you're in that fight or flight mode, these ganglia help send those signals all over your body.
Exactly. They're like a rapid response team getting everything ready for action.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And what about the other types of ganglia?
So then you have the terminal ganglia, and these are more associated with the parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
They're located closer to the organs they control, which allows for more fine-tuned regulation.
So it's not just like a blanket rest and digest signal. It's more specific to each organ.
Exactly. It's about making sure each organ is getting exactly what it needs.
That's amazing. It's really cool to see how all these different parts work together.
It really is. And what's even more fascinating is how this balance or imbalance in these systems can impact our everyday lives in so many ways.
Right. And that's something we'll definitely dive into more as we continue.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to explore here.
I'm excited to keep learning more about it.
Me too.
Okay, so we've talked about like the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and how they work together. But I'm curious, like in a more practical sense, how does this balance or like imbalance even play out in our lives?
Yeah, so this is where things get really interesting because, this balance is actually super important for how we deal with stress.
Okay, so like too much of one or the other could cause problems.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, if you're constantly in like that fight or flight mode, right, with your sympathetic nervous system kind of dominant, that can actually lead to chronic stress, anxiety, even physical issues like high blood pressure, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know for me, like when I'm stressed, I definitely feel it physically. My heart rate goes up, my stomach gets all messed up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Your body's giving you those signals.
Yeah. So what about the opposite? Like what happens if the parasympathetic system is kind of sluggish?
Well, if you're not getting enough of that rest and digest time, right, if your parasympathetic system isn't engaging enough, you might have problems like digestive issues, trouble sleeping, even just difficulty relaxing.
So it really is all about finding that balance between the two.
Absolutely. It's like finding that sweet spot.
So the question I'm sure a lot of people are wondering is, can we actually do anything to influence this balance?
That's the cool part. While we can't like directly control the autonomic nervous system the way we control our muscles, we can definitely influence it through different practices.
Okay, so like what kind of practices are we talking about?
Well, one of the most powerful tools you have is your breath.
Oh yeah, I've heard about deep breathing for relaxation.
Right. And there's a reason for that. Deep, slow breathing actually triggers your vagus nerve.
Vagus nerve.
Yeah, it's a key player in the parasympathetic nervous system. When you stimulate the vagus nerve, it's like sending a signal to your body to chill out.
Oh wow. So just by changing how we breathe, we can actually like tell our nervous system to relax.
Exactly. It's like hitting the brakes on that stress response.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What are some other ways we can kind of tap into that power?
Well, another really effective technique is mindfulness meditation.
Okay, yeah, I've heard a lot about that.
It's all about focusing your attention on the present moment, quieting that mental chatter that often triggers those stress responses. And studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice can actually change the physical structure of your brain, strengthening those areas that help with emotional regulation and reducing activity in the amygdala, which is like the fear center of the brain.
Wow, so we can actually train our brains to be less reactive to stress.
Exactly. It's like building up resilience in your nervous system.
That's really cool. So are there any other techniques that maybe are a little quicker if we're feeling overwhelmed in the moment?
Absolutely. There are things called vagal maneuvers, which directly stimulate the vagus nerve. Remember, that's the one that helps shift you into rest and digest mode.
Yeah, so how do you do a vagal maneuver?
They're actually pretty simple. One way is to splash cold water on your face.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sudden change in temperature triggers something called the dive reflex.
Dive reflex.
It's like an ancient survival mechanism that slows down your heart rate and activates the parasympathetic system.
So it's like tricking our body into thinking we're jumping into cold water.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Are there any other vagal maneuvers?
Another easy one is humming. The vibration from humming actually stimulates the vagus nerve.
Oh, wow. So like humming a song.
Yeah, or even just making a gentle sound.
Interesting. And I guess singing or chanting would probably have a similar effect.
Exactly.
It's amazing that these simple things can have such a powerful impact.
Right. It's pretty empowering to realize we have these tools to regulate our nervous system.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about these techniques, but what about like our overall lifestyle? Are there certain things that can affect the balance of the autonomic nervous system?
Oh, for sure. Exercise is a big one.
Yeah.
Regular physical activity actually helps train your autonomic nervous system to respond better to stress.
So it's like a workout for our nervous system.
Exactly. Helps build resilience.
Makes sense. What about social connection? I know like hanging out with friends and family always makes me feel better, but is there actually a connection to the autonomic nervous system there?
Yeah, there definitely is. Studies have shown that social connection and feeling supported can reduce those stress hormones and improve heart rate variability, which is basically a measure of how well your autonomic nervous system is adapting to change.
Oh, wow. So spending time with people we care about is actually good for our nervous system.
It really is. It all
And
comes back to that balance.
it's amazing how it all ties together. Our thoughts, our behaviors, our environment, even our social lives all play a role in shaping the balance of our autonomic nervous system.
Absolutely. It really highlights how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, it's like a whole ecosystem within us.
Exactly. And when you understand these connections, you can start making choices that support your overall well-being.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about being more in tune with ourselves.
Exactly. And realizing that you have more control over your internal state than you might think.
This is all so fascinating. But before we wrap up, I have one more question. If our physical state can impact our emotions, could the autonomic nervous system also play a role in how we perceive the world around us?
That is a really interesting question, and it takes us into this whole other realm of the mind-body connection.
Right, because we started by thinking about the autonomic nervous system as just controlling these basic functions, but now we're seeing how it's tied to so much more.
It really is a deep dive.
Exactly. So what do you think? Could our internal state actually shape how we see the outside world? It's like we've been talking about all the stuff going on inside, and now we're wondering if that affects how we see the world outside, you know?
Yeah, it really makes you think about that connection between the mind and the body.
Yeah, and how it all kind of blends together. So
Exact.
practically speaking, how could our autonomic nervous system affect how we see things?
Well, think about it this way. Have you ever noticed that like when you're anxious or stressed, everything just seems like kind of more threatening?
Oh yeah, totally. When I'm stressed out, even little things can feel like a big deal.
Exactly. And that's because your autonomic nervous system is already in that fight or flight mode.
Right.
So your senses are heightened, your brain is on high alert looking for danger, and you're just more likely to see things in a negative light.
So basically my own internal state is affecting how I experience the world around me.
Exactly. It's like you're looking through a different lens, depending on whether you're relaxed or stressed.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. So does that mean that if I can shift my physical state to be more relaxed, I might actually perceive the world as being calmer?
Precisely. It's like you're adjusting the filter through which you experience reality.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So those vagal maneuvers we were talking about before, like splashing cold water on your face or humming, could those actually help us see the world in a different way?
Absolutely. It's not just about feeling calmer. It's about literally changing how you perceive things.
That's amazing. So it's not just about threats and safety either, right?
Right. Your autonomic state can influence all sorts of things like your focus, your decision-making, even your creativity and how you interact with other people.
So basically we're talking about potentially thinking and acting differently depending on the state of our autonomic nervous system.
Exactly. It highlights just how important it is to find those practices that help you create balance in your nervous system.
Yeah, it's not just about physical health. It's about our whole experience of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about realizing that you have more agency over your internal state than you might think.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. It's amazing how much we've uncovered about this hidden world within us.
Yeah. And we've really only scratched the surface.
So to our listener out there, we encourage you to keep learning about this incredible system that's doing so much for you behind the scenes.
Yeah. Pay attention to what your body is telling you. And remember that you have the power to influence your internal state and how you experience the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the autonomic nervous system.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you learned some cool new things and that you'll join us again next time for another deep dive.